when you walk into a broadcast booth, you don't know, or you put on a headset, you don't know what the game's going to hold, but that's kind of the magic to it. That's kind of the fun of, okay, what's going to happen? Like, how can you react in the moment to whatever unfolds on the field or on the court?
That's the voice of Chris King. You might recognize it if you listen to WSU sports broadcasts. Chris took on announcing duties this fall for football and basketball games on the Cougar Sports Network. It's a homecoming of sorts for him, since he graduated from the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. Welcome to the Washington State Magazine podcast. We bring you stories of Washington State University, from fascinating alumni like Chris to groundbreaking research and community connections. I'm Larry Clark, editor of the magazine. I talked with Chris about sports broadcasting, coming back to WSU, telling sports stories, and some of the challenges of announcing live games. Hi, Chris.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure, I'm really glad to be able to talk to you and learn a little bit about your journey back to WSU and into WSU sports. So, first of all, tell me a little bit about where you came from and how you ended up at WSU.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm from Marysville originally, so kind of born and raised in Marysville. I guess born in Everett, but then that's the closest hospital. So Marysville my whole time growing up, and there's no better place to go to a broadcasting school than the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication.
That's right.
And so out of Marysville, Pilchuck High School, was very fortunate, got a little bit of scholarship money too, at the time, I don't know if they still have it, a Regents scholarship where they had two kids, I think from every public school in the state, that got a little bit of scholarship money. I was very, very lucky to get that. And then there was a Snohomish County Alumni Association kind of leadership award that came with some scholarship money. So it was a slam dunk without that, but it was really great, and I'm forever appreciative with that. And so it was off to come here and had such a great experience for 4 years. And if you get into sports broadcasting, specifically play-by-play broadcasting, which is what I, kind of specialize in. You never hang your hat on like your career as a failure unless you find your way back to your alma mater. At the same point, you always are aware, like if the job of your alma mater ever came open, that's the ultimate job. So I have been very, very lucky. I mean, the stars really have to line up where this job opened. Matt Chaz now had the position. He's super talented and a great guy. He did such an incredible job, but he, moved on for another opportunity at North Carolina State. So this job was open. And so for me, it was, oh yeah, well, I'm throwing the kitchen. I'm doing whatever I can to try to, position myself for this and let it be known that I'm very interested. And then that whole process kind of came through, and just very lucky when the dust settled that I was able to take over, and here I am.
That's great. So why sports broadcasting? Were you always interested in it? How'd you end up here in this field?
Yes, so always interested in it. Probably always knew early on I was never good enough at sports for that would be a path for me to hang around for a long time. But just it's almost a sense of it's fun to be the one to pass along a score or to give someone like a tidbit of news or an update. Maybe that was like from a young age of having that. And then just the action of sports, I just always drew me to it of like, yeah, there's an event, there's something going on. And then maybe just that spot of like, hey, you have some news to share with someone that they want to hear. So those kind of two combination of things, and it just seems like so much fun. Like that's kind of it. Like you see other, like you grow up either listening to Bob Robertson doing Cougar games, or you listen to Dave Niehaus doing the Mariners, or Kevin Calabro doing the Sonics, Rick Riz doing the Mariners. Like someone actually gets to do that. Like that's their job. They get to go to the games and they get to broadcast them. And that's a job that someone gets to do. Like that blew my mind. Like that is the most fun thing ever. So it was always, really, there was never anything else that I could ever remember wanting to do. And it's a tough competitive business, but that was kind of always the thought of like, well, how do you do that? So everything kind of along the way was just trying to answer that question of, well, how do you become the guy who's doing that? Because that looks like a lot of fun.
It seems like a lot of fun. And I know a lot of us who enjoy Cougar sports, and we really connect to those voices and those people who are giving us the play-by-play. And so, really appreciate you stepping into that.
Well, thank you. And it's one of those things, too, where it's not about me or whoever else has had the job, and but more so them. But I just think it's not about me. Like they've been there between Bob and Matt Chasnow. There's some great people, but like you're just really lucky because there is just such a special magic around being a Cougar and around being a Coug fan that there is this great fan base excited to follow along with Cougar athletics. So to be the one fortunate enough to, to be there, and just such a great broadcast crew too. I've stepped into an incredible situation on the football side. Alex Brink does color, who is an outstanding quarterback here, but is such a good communicator and has such a good football mind. And Jessamine McIntyre does sidelines. She's outstanding. She's been on the broadcast, I think it's either 13 or 14 years. So not only does she do a great job, but her institutional knowledge of the Cougs, and she works in Seattle sports radio full time. So she just has such a great kind of thought of the full landscape. And then Jerry Kylo, we're super lucky. He's the engineer, and Jerry Kylo is as good of an engineer as you'll find. So everyone has their jobs to try to make it sound as best as possible. And Jerry is the one who gets us on the air. He makes everything sound so good because, you maybe don't think about it with the broadcast, but what makes a broadcast fun to listen to is when you hear the band and you hear the crowd. And it's theater of the mind. You're trying to paint the picture. And so much of that is part of it. And what Jerry does, he is so good. And on the basketball side, get to work with Craig Elo. So just very fortunate to step into this situation where it's not only WSU's great because of the passion behind it, and there's this great group of people who make the broadcast as good as possible. So I've just viewed it as my job to come in and to try to, be a point guard and to let everyone else shine who has shined so far, and have a lot of fun. And it's a broadcast. I feel like everyone, hopefully, who tunes in here's like the people we're having fun because we are.
Oh, I think we do all hear that for sure. And it's great to know some of the people behind the scenes too, because you don't hear about them very often, like the engineer and some of the others. Of course, Alex Brink and Jessamine McIntyre, I do.
And I should say as well, just even more beyond. So Derek Dice, who's a Cougar graduate, does the Cougar pregame show. He does the postgame show.
Yeah.
And he does an outstanding job. He does that with either Grady Emerson or Billy Newman, two former players. Mm-hmm. And then we have Luke Hallett, who's back in the studio back in North Carolina. And he's the one kind of running things back there. But he's also really good on the air, and he's doing score updates. So it's kind of this whole big team effort that goes into making this possible, because the pregame show is 2 hours prior to kickoff. The postgame show goes for, a while afterwards, just everyone's working really hard to, create the best kind of Cougar broadcast possible.
It does sound very much like a team sport, which suits the profession.
It does too. And some of my background, I did minor league baseball for a bunch of years, which is so much fun. It's day in and day out. And you're kind of around the team, but it is kind of fun to have your own little team within the team, because minor league baseball, you do that by yourself. I've done basketball both with a partner or by myself. And it is really fun when you have your own team that you're working with, where you're a team within the team, and, you can't control, like, we've been very lucky. I've been super fortunate. As we talk here, the Apple Cup happened with this huge dramatic finish.
No kidding.
And a Cougar win. Then the next week, this just crazy double overtime game against San Jose State. And, you dream about getting to do games like that. You can't control, when you walk into a broadcast booth, you don't know, or you put on a headset, you don't know what the game's going to hold, but that's kind of the magic to it. That's kind of the fun of, okay, what's going to happen? Like, how can you react in the moment to whatever unfolds on the field or on the court? So I'm very lucky where we've had these really memorable moments already just in my first year.
Sure. Yeah, those were exciting games. I have to admit, it was affecting my blood pressure a bit, but definitely worth it. So, by the way, what was the minor league baseball team? Was it here in the state or?
In the state. So the vast majority of my career has been in the state of Washington, or even I came from the University of Idaho. So I most recently was there doing football and men's basketball. And I started doing men's basketball there over a decade ago. So my time had been a while. But in the state of Washington, the Tri-City Dust Devils, they're in the Northwest League. In my time, they were an Angels, Padres, and Rockies affiliate, and then before that did summer collegiate baseball in Wenatchee for the Wenatchee Apple Sox. So it is kind of funny looking across the state. It's places I've either lived or worked, or just this is my home state. So it means so much to me that the the stations that carry the Cougar games are in places that are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And minor league baseball is just a blast to watch and listen to. So, it sounds like it was a lot of fun for you.
It was great. There's no better experience to improve as a broadcaster than minor league baseball. My first year with the Tri-City Dust Devils, it was 76 games in 79 days. And it's sort of, if you come back from a road trip and the bus gets back to the stadium before the sun comes up, that's a pretty good like overnight trip. But then, you're right back to it. That might be a stretch of 28 days in a row with a game. Yeah. So to get better, you get better at broadcasting play-by-play by doing it. And there's baseball every single day, and there's some long games. It's kind of like a hunk of clay. Here, mold it and make it good and make it interesting. So to be to improve as a broadcaster, there's probably nothing better than doing baseball for a while. Football is kind of its own different beast. How to track 22 guys in the field at once and to kind of make it all sound smooth. But minor league baseball is pretty special. I would recommend it to any broadcaster. If you can do minor league baseball, the skills you have to pull that off can kind of get you through any other play-by-play.
Wow. It sounds challenging for sure. And kind of, speaking of challenges, when you were at WSU, did you take part in some broadcast work here, Cable 8? And who were some of your favorite professors? Who did you learn from?
Good question. Yeah. So I was here from 2005 to 2009 and involved in Cable 8, especially those last couple years. The professor that comes to mind the most is Glenn Johnson, who just been great keeping in touch with him over the years. And when this job came open, I called to tell him hey, I'm going to go for this. Just a heads up. And then afterwards, when I got it, it was fun to call and tell him that I did get it. And then I ended up TAing for him too. So I loved my experience with Cable 8 and just to be around everything that comes with the Murrow School and just excellent professors and instructors, and you're around like-minded people who are hungry to learn and ambitious to get better in broadcasting. And what a great experience to have that here and to, stay in touch with my classmates who have gone on into broadcasting or maybe transitioned to something else, and to see kind of those who came before and those who have come after. And that Murrow tradition is a real thing. And I take a lot of pride in just having, gone to the Murrow School. And whenever you come across a fellow Murrow grad, that's really neat, especially in the sports broadcasting world.
Yeah, certainly. I've interviewed a couple of them over the years, and it's always wonderful to hear their stories. And it's that same mentality and same camaraderie that they had. And incidentally, most of them also, point to Glenn Johnson as an influence on their lives and careers. So that's great to hear. And speaking of your career, you went to the University of Idaho, but you were also at Boise State. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience there? What did you learn, and how did that help you grow as a professional?
Interesting as I look back on it, because recently there was a football game at Boise State, so it was neat to go back there. That was kind of like a big kind of turning point, or going down a different path in your career. So I was very lucky. I went to work in Wenatchee for the baseball team there. Jim Corcoran, who's a WSU grad who started radio stations, had business journals, and then got into baseball, was so good to me. And I worked for the team, and I worked there full-time year-round doing sponsorship sales, and then worked with Jim and Ken Osborne. I did high school football, Wenatchee high school football, but it was part of me was like, well, if I ever had a chance, if the WSU job ever came open someday, how would you have a chance to do that? And you'd probably have to kind of climb up the ranks through the college route if you ever had a shot. So I left the job there, which was a really great situation, to go work at Boise State doing women's basketball when they had an opening. And it was a significant pay cut. I mean, a significant pay cut. But it was for, hey, this is, that's kind of how you climb the ladder. If you ever to get a shot at a WSU type job, you kind of have to start moving your way up through the college world and in that kind of, that whole ecosystem, if you will. So I was at Boise State for 2 years and announced women's basketball and really had a positive experience there. I didn't say that as much when I was at Idaho. I did mention where I was before, because Idaho and Boise State, there's the rivalry there. But then they were kind enough at Idaho to hire me from Boise State. We loved it here. I mean, to the point where my wife is a WSU grad. She was on the rowing team here.
Oh, Oh, cool.
So we're both, I'm from Marysville. She's from Lake Forest Park. So, both from the west side, but we, settled down here where I had my job at Idaho and we got married. We bought a house in Pullman 4 years ago. So that was just because we love being here and this is where we want to be, not ever knowing if this job would ever come open, but grateful for what I had at Idaho. And then, it was, obviously if it ever had come open, it would be like, oh, great. Well, my chips would be all into the middle of the table to apply for the job and try to get it. And had a wonderful experience at Idaho. People there are great. Worked with great coaches, administrators, players, fans. But this job did come open, and it worked out. So here we are now, and I root for Idaho. 364 days out of the year. Just the one day would be when they're not playing WSU in any sport. But so we love life on the Palouse. And I joked with someone recently. My commute went from 15 to 7 minutes. From Pullman to the Kibby, my house in Pullman to the Kibby Dome to here. And I was talking with Jim Walton, the former WSU football coach, who we were talking about the commute. And he said, yes, I used to tell people it's one Merle Haggard song. So that's the commute now I have is one Merle Haggard song from Pioneer Hill when I come to campus.
That's great, especially for anybody who's spent time or grew up on the west side, and some of the commutes over there. It's quite refreshing to live in the Palouse and be able to work here.
Yeah, very much so. When we go back, my dad's joke is always, where did all these people come from? When you're like traffic, and especially being up in Marysville, it's kind of crept up north. So when we go back to visit, that's what I always think to myself. So here, it's a crosswalk traffic more than the people traffic, or more than the car traffic.
For sure. And so, you've won awards actually in Idaho and speaks to your abilities as a sports broadcaster. But beyond that, what are some of the hardest things to do as a sports broadcaster? What are the real challenges?
I would say you put a lot into prep. Like the biggest thing is, and I heard this, I was at, you mentioned the awards. I was fortunate enough to go out to the National Sports Media Association Awards Weekend in North Carolina this summer. And just so many great, Joe Buck gives the state winners the award because he won the national award. And you're around all these outstanding broadcasters. They have seminars. And I thought Andrea Kramer, she was there and had a seminar that I went to. And I thought she just hit the nail on the head with how she described something. She said, preparation is your armor. And so maybe the hardest part is just you want to be as prepped as possible. And there are games where you maybe get to 10, 20% of what you prepped, but that's just not how the game unfolded. It all depends on if you have a great nugget of information that you want to get in, well, if it's a 50-0 blowout, then it doesn't matter WSU's record in games decided by one score, as much as that might be a really cool piece of information you found. So it's taking all of this and having it at your fingertips, so hopefully you can flawlessly reference it when needed. That would be kind of the biggest thing. And just it's kind of cutting down on buffer too, because if you listen to a radio broadcast, you don't want to hear the broadcaster reference, well, number 10 made a nice play. Mm-hmm. That means nothing. You close your eyes. What is the listener? How are you painting a picture for them? That you say number 10, that you got to tell them what the name is. So it's all, I think of it as a challenge as cutting down the buffer time and how can you as flawlessly and seamlessly describe what is happening on the field or the court while weaving it into the context of that game, to the context of that season, while also setting up your color commentator or your analyst. And one thing for broadcasting, if everyone ever listening doesn't hear me say the score enough, find me and yell at me, because that's like number one. If you're doing a radio broadcast, say the score. If you're turning on a game, what's the first thing you want to hear?
I want the score.
You want the score. So that's kind of if there's fundamentals of, anything you do in life, that would be the blocking and tackling of broadcasting, is say the score. You can't say the score often enough. So those are just some of the things that you always are aware of, and you can never emphasize the fundamentals enough and the basics enough, because it's easy to get away from that. You're trying to describe something in a flowery fashion, but you're like, well, the biggest thing is I need to make sure I'm, getting the score in between all that. So those are the challenges that you have kind of as you're making the climb up and, trying to improve, and everyone's constantly trying to improve, but also just you're always thinking of those type of things.
Yeah, and I know as a listener, I'm listening to the broadcast, I want the score, but I'm also always impressed the knowledge of some of the players and their history and their background, their story. And I think that is maybe an example of the prep that you're talking about that me as a listener, and I know many other listeners really enjoy because, it's about the players a lot of times and then also the drama of the game, but to get that background is great. And so do you have any favorite stories, even from your time, with minor league baseball or Cable 8, some player story that just really grabbed you?
Ooh, that's a good one. So this one is more like a broadcaster / player story. But the thing is, and this is why I'm out of practice. You're just there to be present, but you never know what you're going to pick up. And even as you build relationships with players and coaches, that's how you find out good bits of information. Here's two. Here's one where found this out after the fact, but it's a great, great fact that we included on our coaches show, and I'll include moving forward. So that San Jose State game, Cougs win, dramatic fashion, double overtime, and it's Emmett Brown is the San Jose State quarterback, who's a former WSU quarterback, was with the program the last 2 years. San Jose State goes for that 2-point conversion, and the ball is stripped loose by Quinn Roth, and the Cougs recover. That's how they win the game. Well, at practice that next week, talking to the edge rushers coach for WSU, he mentioned how Quinn Roth and Emmett Brown were roommates last year. They weren't just teammates. They were roommates at WSU, where that's the kind of thing you don't pick up unless you're out there and you're around. That's why it's kind of boots on the ground is how you get good information. And, I think of these broadcasts, the goal is to provide for a WSU fan the best possible, most informed broadcast. Because, the TV broadcast, you're getting a 30,000-foot view of both teams, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, we hear from Coug fans that, hey, we turn down the TV and listen to the radio, and we want to give the best broadcast for Coug fans that gives them all information and stories that they, might not get anywhere else, where it's really in depth there. So that's always the goal. And the goal is where if it's someone listening from another team, they can listen in and get a really good broadcast that they're completely informed by what's going on. Where, we're biased in the sense that, we're the WSU broadcast.
Sure.
So there's going to be more inflection when Kyle Thornton makes the stop in the Apple Cup that essentially wins the game than had it been vice versa. But you're also wanting to tell the accurate story. So that's one thought there. Another story that I think of as minor league baseball is there was a pitcher named Brett Kennedy with the Dust Devils, and he had just been drafted out of Fordham, which isn't necessarily a baseball power. And at that point, the Dust Devils were at a spot where a lot of guys would get drafted and then get straight to start their career, would be assigned with the Dust Devils. And so me and knowing, my broadcast background, the best broadcaster ever, Vin Scully, went to Fordham. And I was talking to him. I think we were getting off the bus. The bus had stopped to get food on a road trip or something. And I said, hey, I was like, did you know that Vin Scully went to Fordham? And he goes, as a matter of fact, he just called me the other day. I said, what? And he goes, yeah. And he played for me the voicemail. So Vin Scully, because not a lot of guys from Fordham get drafted, had heard that a Fordham player had gotten drafted, reached out to the school, got his phone number, and called and left him a voicemail congratulating him.
Wow.
And he played that for me. So I loved being able to tell that story on the air. And I had to kind of build a little bit of trust, and he played it for me and then be able to pass that along. But I love that story, and that's just from you ride the bus with the team. You're around these guys. You say hello. If there's some common connection like that or something that might lead to a good story, you say, oh, what about this? Or do you know this person? So I really loved that one because, that's something that he'll cherish because, Vince Scully, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but is considered one of the greatest play-by-play, if not the greatest broadcasters ever. And, has this personalized message from him reaching out to thank him or to congratulate him. And then that was when he was pitching, I got to weave that story in on the air, and hopefully that was a fun one for listeners to hear.
I'm sure it was. What an amazing story. And that's a voicemail he'll want to keep forever.
Exactly.
I love that. Any other dreams for the future, as you're kind of continuing this? And that could be your future or what you want to see the Cougs do in any sport.
Well, any Coug championship, I'm looking forward to being able to broadcast. But really, I mean, this is to me the best job in the world. Like that's how any college fan should want how their broadcaster to view the job, and that's how I view it. This is the best job in the world, and I had the good fortune of knowing Bob Robertson a little bit. I did a couple of broadcasts with him. I think he was 87 and I was 29, where we did a minor league baseball game together and we split the innings. And so he was involved with the broadcast for over 50 years. So I guess my goal is to try to build a relationship with the fan base and to, they get used to hearing me because they're used to hearing an outstanding broadcaster in Matt Chasnow, who is so good. Mm-hmm. And Bob Robertson did it for so many years. And Bud Namick was so good for a number, doing Cougar basketball for a number of years and then doing football for a handful of years. So I guess the biggest thing, my goal is to you build your credibility by working hard and hopefully doing a good job. So just getting the opportunity to do that, and a handful of games into my first year, I just every game I go to, every day I go to work, I'm just super grateful, and to just try to continue to build on that. And I'm excited for what the future holds. I mean, there is the logo, the Cougar head logo is a universal language. Everyone recognizes that
Go
wherever
Cougs.
You are in the world. Go Coug. So to be able to have this unique role within Cougar athletics is a special opportunity. So to just keep building on that's the biggest thing for me.
That's great. And you mentioned that people could contact you. What's the best way that Coug Nation can let you know, hey, you're doing a great job, or with questions?
Yeah, sure. So my email is christopher.king@learfield.com. Reach out anytime. Love to hear from people. Love to connect with people on social media, on Twitter, X at Chris King Sports. So yeah, and then it's really fun too. We do the Cougar football hours, but the coaches show, we do those at Zeppos, and to be able to meet people there. The games are fun. But you're up high, you're not around folks as much. But it's fun to talk to people before and after the coaches shows, to be around then. And I've been lucky where I was at the Hall of Fame Athletics Hall of Fame ceremony,
yes,
and then kind of those future functions. I'm just excited to meet everyone because this is. When I wasn't busy with my work at Idaho, and I had a full plate there, but if a Cougar game was at 7:00 at night and an Idaho game was at 2:00, then I'd be tuning in and listening because I wanted to know what was going on with the Cougs. So I appreciate the history of not only the school, but specifically for this, athletics and what Cougar football and Cougar basketball and Cougar baseball and all the other sports mean. So it's just fun to think about what's ahead, and everyone else kind of it's part of this shared community. That's what makes sports fun. It's kind of a shared thing that everyone, regardless of any other differences, we can all get together and be proud Cougs and to root on all our teams.
Very much so. Yeah, it's definitely it builds that common community, especially across Coug Nation, where there's so much loyalty, and there's such a story to sports. And I just want to say thanks to you as a storyteller and as someone who brings it to life for all those people out there who are listening. So really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And there's no better story to me to tell than the story of Cougar athletics. And it's been a really fun football season as we're talking here today. And I can't wait for the basketball season. And, college sports it's changing. That's clear. So maybe some of the opponents the Cougs have played are different than the ones in 10 years ago. But there's a lot of accuse me of looking at life through crimson and gray colored glasses, but there's going to be a lot of great stories to be told moving forward. So I'm really pumped for the future of Cougar athletics, and just very grateful to be a part of it in my own little small way.
Well, great. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Chris King. You can find more podcast episodes, stories, and videos at magazine.wsu.edu. Let us know if you have ideas for the podcast. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And tell your friends to listen. The show was recorded and produced by me, Larry Clark. Our podcast music is by WSU Emeritus Music Professor and Composer Greg Yazanitsky.